Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and 11.0.5 is right around the corner, and with it, a giant list of class changes. It is insane the amount of changes that are happening in this next patch. So in today's video, I wanted to kind of summarize them and decipher them into and distill them into which ones are standing out the most to me, which classes are looking the most exciting, something that I absolutely have to get my hands on and try so that you can have a good idea of what is honestly looking epic for you as well. But like I said, there's a lot of changes, so we're going to dive into them as quickly as possible. Deathbringer is seeing a huge rework for Death Knight specifically. This is supposedly to increase kind of talent builds and options for things like Frost Death Knight. It's still a bit uncertain as to whether or not these changes will ultimately net in something that's like really strong, but if you're interested in expanding on new talents as a Frost Death Knight, this could be your opportunity with the changes to Deathbringer. Of course, it's still competing with Riders of the Apocalypse, but nonetheless, I like that they're looking at this and trying to rebalance some of the hero talent trees and looking at making more options for a lot of the other specializations. For Demon Hunter, we're really not seeing a lot, which was really surprising. So Demon Hunter kind of just meh. Moving into 11.0.5, we don't really see a lot for them in power increases or kind of like quality of life changes. Druid is a big one though. Druid is definitely standing out to me. I love this change they're making for buffs, taking them from 4% max mana down to 1%. This is going to reward players for noticing when their buffs have been purged and reapplying them without being punished on their overall mana expenditure. This is a universal change they're making for all the buffs in the game, but one that benefits Druid as well. But Boomkin is obviously receiving a pretty big update. I think the biggest thing for them is the lower cooldown incarnation, the 100-second cooldown reduction, but it's also losing some duration. And again, with Moonkin, much like the Frost Death Knight hero talent changes, I think they're trying to intend on for some new builds and some new options, and that's something that I'm absolutely going to be doing. Unfortunately, at least in a PvP scenario and even in a PvE scenario, their defense is not really getting buffed. And because their defense is not getting buffed, they're probably still going to be very squishy in all of those instances and scenarios, but their damage output looks like it could be a lot of fun. We're receiving a lot of buffs to New Moon and Half Moon, crit damage modifiers as well towards astral spells, Starfall being baseline, so we no longer need to eat it up on the talent tree if we want to run like a Starfall mix build possibly. Some interesting passive talents for Wild Mushroom if you want to cut down on your ability bloat. So overall, Boomkin is getting a nice touch up. I'm just concerned that defensively it's still going to be kind of lacking. Also, Elune's Chosen, they're rewinding some of the nerfs. So I actually had a lot of fun playing the Starfire build of Elune Chosen at the start of the expansion, and then they just sledgehammered that thing into oblivion. So my hope is that this 20% rewind is going to put it into a decent position as far as viability, because I'd love to have that as an option. I love just this hard casting build that feels like the hard casting spells are really pumping numbers. So hopefully that's going to be enough. Offensively, it looks fun. I like the new talents to explore for Boomkin, but defensively, as far as viability, I'm a little bit concerned with it still. Resto Druid is another one that's actually receiving quite a big touch up. And when you read these changes initially, you think they're going to be so overpowered. You're just like, oh my God, like there's no way they're doing this. Reactive Reson's becoming a baseline talent. It's a new purge protection mechanic that when your heal over time effects are removed, they get replaced by a reactive resin, which heals the ally for over 6 seconds, and multiple stacks may overlap. So when you get Fire Breath purged, you basically reapply all those hots as a mini version, and then you can stack those on top of another full row of hots to get a bunch of healing. Nature Swiftness getting 2 charges. Abundance will also reduce the cast time of regrowth by 5% per stack, and Cenarian's Ward's cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds, and its duration is increased by 2 seconds. Swiftmend cooldown reduction by 40% based on the target's health. Cooldown is reduced more when cast on a low health target. Consuming clear casting now causes your regrowth to also cast Nourish on a nearby ally at 60% effectiveness. Dream of Cenarius for kind of damage doing healing type of deal with like atonement style. You're really thinking like Resto Druid, this rework, I think it's going to feel good. Unfortunately, when we get to the PvP section of the changes, you'll see that they basically counter nerfed a lot of this, so it's not super OP. I'm not like expecting Resto Druid to suddenly be better than like Holy Paladin in a PvP scenario or something like that, but it looks like it could be a lot more fun, and the quality of life improvements are definitely putting you in a position where it might be worth at least giving your Resto Druid a go again with that regard. With Evoker, we're just seeing changes towards kind of like their racials because they're giving them, available to every class, but I don't think it's going to be too much. Not basically nothing is really changing for you, Evoker specifically. But Hunter, on the other hand, you're getting a complete rework. Like everything is going crazy with you with the Dark Ranger. I think Hunter has to be the #1 standout for me. Absolutely hit the nail on the head when it comes to the Dark Ranger. I've already geared up my Hunter getting ready for this patch, and I said that literally a month ago, and nothing has changed since then. But definitely you're going to want to play this. They worked on reducing some of the keybind bloat. Black Arrow is going to be kind of a proc focused around your kill shot, and it's hitting really hard. It's hitting some juicy numbers. We see a huge amount of buffs towards the power of the Dark Ranger just as a baseline, whether you're Beastmastery or Marksmanship Hunter, and it's got me really excited. I am very excited. I think that Hunter is going to be superb. It's going to be awesome. I mean, we see numbers like barbed shot damage going up by 100%. Like, I do think that Hunter is likely going to be in a really strong position, especially the Dark Ranger. So, you know, like I said, I'm summarizing all these changes because it's literally like an essay thesis that's coming through, but the just summary of it is that Hunter is friggin' awesome. You're definitely going to want to be checking it out. They're doing some AoE damage buffs to survival. I think it's going to have bit more big impacts on PvE than it is likely going to be on PvP for survival, which maybe it's a little bit disappointing, but they're also buffing Sentinel Hunter as well, along with Dark Ranger here with the Symphonic Arsenal, which is that AoE circle on the ground. So just Hunter in general is feeling, I think, really good with this patch, even despite, you know, recently got some defense nerf. I think this offense and kind of like fantasy driven changes are going to feel awesome. For Mage, we're seeing the same type of buff changes for Mage specifically, and we're seeing really big buffs. You're getting really big buffs. I don't know why you're getting really big buffs. Again, you're already really good, but like Frostfire Mage is getting another buff, and I almost certainly guarantee this thing is going to get nerfed within like 3 days of coming out if it doesn't get nerfed, if somehow they catch wind of this, because we were already seeing like 2 million crits from Frost Mage, and they're just buffing everything on these modifiers that is increasing that, likely because Frostfire isn't competing in PvE, but with no PvP, you know, to counteract this, no PvP changes to counteract this, yeah, Mage is going to be disgustingly good. Spellslinger is also seeing some improvements and buffs as well. And Gravity Lapse, it was a stun in PvE. You're getting an AoE stun. I'm sure it's going to be really desirable in Mythic Plus, but they're not letting you get that in PvP. It's really... oh my god, Mage would have been absolutely crazy with Sun Fury if that was the case. Arcane is getting some talents updates as well, and it's getting massive Spellslinger buffs. So Arcane is getting some love on this patch as well. It could be really cool. Definitely interesting to check out for PvP specifically with these Spellslinger changes. And it seems like Spellslinger is just getting buffed. Frostfire is getting buffed because they're not as strong in PvE to that of Sun Fury. So PvP is getting to see a massive benefit of that. Fire Mage is also seeing some buffs, although it's a little bit uncertain as to like how much it's going to matter. A lot of it's focused around Living Bomb, and that hasn't been particularly good since it got like Omega nerfed a while back in PvP scenarios at least, but it's definitely better than nothing, at least in terms of like your overall damage output, with a lot of changes focused around increasing kind of your single target and a little bit less around your Flame Strike. Frost is also getting Spellslinger buffs on top of Frostfire buffs. Now the Frostfire buffs are so high, I don't really know if the Spellslinger ones are going to be enough because they're buffing the splinter damage, but it might be worth checking out if you've been kind of getting bored of the Frostfire Mage. Spellslinger Frost is getting buffed, so it might be worth checking out. My expectation is that it's probably not going to be like super good. For Monk, Windwalker is getting some massive buffs on this patch. I think it's getting a lot stronger. It's getting a lot of just, you know, modifiers towards a lot of core abilities that do a lot of damage. Mistweaver is getting some updates as well with kind of new baseline abilities for Purge Protection, similar to Resto Druid. Kind of a nice little rework here, but you guys are losing a lot in the PvP build down below, so it's kind of a trade-off for Mistweaver. They're giving you damage output and giving you some quality of life improvements, but then they're taking away some of your talents. But again, those talents were most notably powerful in Rated Battlegrounds, and I think you're still going to be really good in Rated Battlegrounds even without them, but these will help you out in Arena. So I think that's a good trade for Mistweaver. And here's the changes for Windwalker. It's just, you're just going to be getting more damage basically. Paladin's basically getting a complete top up with, you know, auto sacrifice when targets get low health, auto freedom when you mount up on a steed, stun reductions. You see, you're basically orc racial almost without having to be an orc, which is crazy. Turn evil AoE, which is absolutely going to counter specs that are already struggling, like Demonology and Unholy Death Knights. So yeah, Paladin is getting a huge touch up on this patch, and you know, Holy Paladin was already in a really good position. So if you had a Holy Paladin, like your stonks are basically just continuing to rise with Holy Paladin specifically. Ret is seeing some changes as well, although I think they're a little bit less notable. But yeah, basically Holy Paladin is getting a lot of love. Prop Paladin's getting some love as well as like possible flag carrier in Rated Battlegrounds. So definitely need to consider that as well with these changes coming through for it. And Ret's getting kind of like a minor increase with Shield of Righteous damage, although that's probably not going to matter. Actually, I thought that was Shield of Vengeance when I read it the first time. That's unfortunate. Damage, is that meant to say Shield of Vengeance? Why would you buff Shield of Righteous? Word of Glory healing and 6% damage. That's basically what we're seeing for Rep Paladins. For Holy Paladins, for Priests, couple of quality of life changes for the Rift specifically, but nothing major for Priests. I know a lot of PvE Priests are like, give us a kick, give us an interrupt. We don't want an interrupt, then that's not happening. You're not really seeing a lot. Rogue is a lot. I don't know really what to think of Rogue, because they're basically completely changing the specs. Like, Outlaw Rogue is not going to have Shadow Step anymore. You're going to have 2 charges of Grappling Hook. That just immediately sounds like a big nerf. But then they're making Between the Eyes, but if you press Between the Eyes with that stealth active, it kind of puts it on cooldown, and then it comes up and it's like that messy point. They've removed that pain point, so you can be a little bit more sloppy with the rotation, but it's a big quality of life. If you're just spamming that Between the Eyes with Crackshot talents, like, you kind of get overexcited sometimes, press it one too many times, and it's on cooldown and you can't chain it together. They're easing that up a bit, but losing Shadow Step with Outlaw is going to definitely be felt, because grapple can get like rooted mid cast, and there's a lot of things that can stop that. And they're basically taking away like all of the cooldown reduction and quite a few keybinds. They're making things like Thistle Tea passive. You don't have to use it. So maybe this is going to be nice, and it's like a quality of life and makes Rogue more accessible for players, and not just kind of like the top end level of players, by making some of these abilities passives and proc based. But I'm a bit worried about their overall performance, especially when it comes to Outlaw or Subtlety, because they're removing a lot of the cooldown reduction, but then they're just reducing your cooldowns baseline, and I'm hoping going to compensate your damage with the loss of the cooldown reduction, and you're losing a lot of survivability as well. So Rogue is in this position where I think it could either completely flop, or it's like, oh my god, they just made this spec really awesome, even for people who haven't played Rogue their entire life, to get in on for the first time. And I think it's one or the other. I don't think it's going to come in the middle with that. So run your risk with Rogue with caution. Shaman is getting a huge update, again, one of the biggest ones as well, along with Hunter, with massive animation updates across everything. I've covered them specifically. Stormbringer specifically as well for Enhance and Elemental looks exciting. I want to see these lightning builds that giving you passive movement speed in this, a lot of more synergy on Elemental, so your spells have more interactivity with each other, a little bit of cooldown or ability bloat reduction as well, with Ice Fury now becoming, it's basically a shared keybind with Frost Shock. So you got keybind reduction, quality of life improvement, massive new visuals, big buffs coming into this. So I think it's likely going to be a lot of fun. It's still not sure how you're going to compete with classes like Feral Druids and the Shadow Priests. We're not seeing any nerfs coming to them, at least in PvP scenarios. But as far as like new and cool stuff to check out, yeah, Shaman is definitely on the top of my list. I think whether you're playing any of the 3 specs, really, just checking out all those cool new animations is going to be awesome. For Warlock, I didn't know 100% what to think of like the Overlord changes that they were coming through with this, if this was a nerf or not. So Destruction, it's on the table as to whether or not this is really like a massive change for them. But Demonic Art increases the damage of your next Chaos Bolt, Rain of Fire, Shadow Burn by 100%, reduces cast time by 50. They basically want to take away your instant Rain of Fire spamming, but then make Chaos Bolt more valuable. And that should technically be better in PvP scenarios, but in PvE, probably not going to feel too great. Warrior, we're seeing AoE nerfs, but then we're seeing single target buffs and kind of like sustained damage increase. So Fury Warrior will likely feel a lot better in PvP with that type of direction as far as tuning. And then that was basically it for the PvE and PvP changes. They're updating the MMR queues for Battleground Blitz, so hopefully you're not going to get like 5 rogues on one team and no rogues on the other team. That's really good. They didn't make any posts yet officially as far as MMR, but I'm really hoping they take a look at MMR. I think MMR and gold costs on like enchanting your character and embellishments and all that type of stuff is just real. The MMR is too low, gold costs are too high, and those are like the main pain points right now, at least for PvP. Love that they're already preemptively targeting a bunch of these items coming from the new raid in PvP, as they would likely be problematic. And then you can see the PvP changes for Resto Druid. Like, they're not going to be super OP with the changes above, but I think that the quality of life improvements is likely going to make them feel pretty good. And then here we get into the kind of the weakness of the Mistweaver, right? You're losing the Thunder Focus TPP talent. So giving you some damage, giving you some direct buffs, but taking away what is making you like really crazy in a PvP scenario. They're also making Zen Sphere. You get more out of it, but you can also counter it by dispelling it a little more frequently. Curious to see how Spellbreaker works for Paladin, the new talent. Eye for an Eye can now also trigger at 100% effectiveness for magic damage. Eye for an Eye increased by 150% in PvP. could be a really cool kind of Thorns effect towards casters. Divine Plea is getting reiterated again into Aura Mastery. I don't think Holy Paladin needed a mana recovery tool. They're already kind of like the best as far as that in PvP. But it's just going to make you even better. So you're probably likely going to be, no one's going to be able to catch up to you in that regard. Prop Paladin, they're giving you some kind of like healing, self-healing ability, not allies. And I think this is, again, trying to get Prop Paladin into a bit of a better spot as possible. Battleground Blitz specialization. Probably going to make you super OP in World PvP too. Ultimate Retribution. Not sure if this is kind of a meme. You can mark an enemy for Retribution, and then if they die, you can cast Res on a fallen ally, like Battleground Blitz. You might be able to get some cheeky plays with this, and it would just be incredibly situational in Arena to the point where I don't know if it's worth dropping a talent. They did do some preemptive nerfs to Elemental, given all the buffs that they did above to it. So again, much like Resto Druid, maybe it's not going to end up in like this insane position, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because Lightning Shaman looked really awesome and I was stoked for it and I wanted to get into it. So I'm hoping that it's still going to be awesome, still going to be stoked for it. But that's basically the breakdown for the patch here. Just wanted to give you guys a quick update and glance at it. What are the final changes coming through? Hope you guys enjoyed the update and this discussion. It's got you thinking about what you're going to be doing and what you're going to be checking out here in 11.0.5. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video and I will see you in the next one.